It's Wednesday. That means it's time for another Q&A episode here on OTRSCentral. They happen every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday on this channel. If you want your questions answered in the future, check out the description box below with information on how to do so. Also, make sure if you want to know my thoughts on sports and non-wrestling related topics, check out my Schleg Daddy TV channel here on YouTube. That link is in the description, as well as my most recent article for ProFootballSpot.com with the Chicago Bears Mount Rushmore. Lots of pertinent information that you should check out in the description box is what I'm saying. But let's get started with this Q&A. At Javier Artabo asks, what was the whole point of Cena going over Bray Wyatt to be selling that stupid never give up towel during his entrance? It would seem so. It's Cena's terrible tale. Never give up. And other people have talked about this too in reference to the fact that they feel like John Cena and the WWE are more concerned with selling John Cena's merch for the WWE than selling his character and selling his opponents and selling the storylines, the feuds, and the matches that he's involved in. And that's a legitimate complaint because now he's gone so overtly to the point where he's waving a freaking towel. It gets ridiculous. Maybe, just maybe, you'd sell even more of that merch if you did a better job with the character and the storylines that he was involved in, and the rest of it would take care of itself. Just saying. At Greatness DJ, what are your thoughts on Sarah Palin calling for Obama's impeachment as president? Imagine that. Sarah Palin saying something stupid. Why is Sarah Palin allowed to speak? Even more importantly, if you want to say First Amendment, okay, fine. Why is Sarah Palin allowed to speak and anybody takes her seriously at all? Just unbelievable. Now, if I would have sat there during the Bush administration, which I actually did, and said that a president sitting there and manipulating the terror alert levels before the 2004 election or trying to in order to ratchet up the fear should have led to him being impeached, or sending us to war and lying about the reasons for going to war, like in the case of Iraq when I called for impeachment of Bush for something like that, which would seem to be severe, not to mention a war that was unconstitutional. Then Republicans like Sarah Palin would have labeled me and other people that would have called for that as unpatriotic and said we were engaging in anti-American activities. But now, since it's the Democrat and since it's Barack Obama and he's using executive action, executive orders in a similar manner that George W. Bush did, we have a problem with that now, and now we need to impeach him. Oh, Jesus Christ. It's just absolutely ridiculous. We saw that before when you tried to impeach, Bill Clinton. It wasn't good for the country. In fact, it was disastrous. You better really have a damn good reason to try and impeach a president. And Obama's done a lot of things that aren't that great, but I don't know if he's done anything that is truly impeachable or is even worth going through the effort of trying to impeach him. At Eric Alex Sandberg, do you think Kevin Steen is this generation's Stone Cold? No. If I had to associate Kevin Steen with anybody of the past, I would say he's maybe more like a Terry Funk. When I see Kevin Steen, that's maybe more so who he reminds me of in terms of a legend from the past. Really off the wall, really fucking crazy, and will do just about anything, and just at times makes you feel weird and awkward when you're watching him, but you love every minute of it. That's who Kevin Steen reminds me of, is Terry Funk, and that's a great, great compliment. At Shadow of Bat 94, what would WrestleMania 30 have been like if Punk hadn't walked out? You would have had Punk versus Triple H. You would have had Daniel Bryan probably versus Sheamus, and you would have had Batista leave WrestleMania 30 the WWE World Heavyweight Champion. And that's all there is to it. At Real Ziggy 23, hey Schleg Daddy, do you think Randy Orton is kind of underrated as a wrestler? No, I don't. Because there were for several years, for especially the internet community, it hasn't been okay to like Cena, so for a long time, Orton was the anti-Cena, and as a result, he had the admiration, the love, and the respect of the internet community. Believe me, at a time where I was trying to tell people how stupid Randy Orton was and how much he fucking sucked, I used to get quite a bit of blowback from pointing that out. So no, he's not underrated as a wrestler because at times his matches tend to be a little bit on the dull side. Even though he is a really good worker, they do tend to be on the dull side, a little bit slow moving, and as a character in general, he's just kind of dull. It's just the way it is. At Daniel_Russman, would WWE have to turn John Cena heel if he cheated on his girlfriend in real life? No. No, they would sweep that under the rug just like they swept him getting a divorce under the rug. Furthermore, they would actually try and use some pro-Cena propaganda and insinuate that the girlfriend cheated on him first. Oh, they wouldn't turn him heel for that. They try and make a bigger split babyface out of him. At Mark_Wayland67, most underrated moment in Hogan and Austin's career. Most underrated moment in Hogan and Austin's career. For Austin, I will go with SummerSlam 97. The fact that, even though it barely happened, the fact that he had a broken neck and he was able to finish his match against Owen Hart. I think when people talk about the evolution and the development and the creation of the Stone Cold character, they'll point to his feud with Bret Hart. They'll point to the match at WrestleMania 13. They'll point to all the stuff with Vince McMahon. They'll point to the beer truck and the Zamboni and all of this and all of that. And the one thing that always seems to get lost in the shuffle is just how much him finishing that match truly established him as the toughest SOB on the planet, so to speak. And it allowed them, because they had to hide him with the neck injury, to really develop his character more. That was as much a key moment in the development of the career and the character of Stone Cold Steve Austin, if there was anything that did it. It truly was. As far as Hogan, in terms of underrated moments, I don't think Hogan gets enough credit. This might not be the best example, but I don't think Hogan gets enough credit for putting over Brock Lesnar on SmackDown in 2002 and by all things submitting to a bear hug. A fucking bear hug. And Hogan lost to Brock Lesnar. You know, Hogan's whole 2002 run, he put over several people. Clean. Legit. I think that's a little underrated. At Little Beast 36J, don't you think the WWE should push two guys at the top so if one goes down, you have a backup plan like you had with Rock and Austin? Well, no shit. Ain't that the fucking truth, brother? Why would you want to limit yourself? And why would you even limit yourself with two? Why not try to make 3 or 4 huge fucking megastars at a similar level? Maybe you have one guy that stands just a little bit above the rest. But you have those 3 other guys that you could go back to, like I talked about in the last half of the 2000s decade. You had what I called the Fortunate Four of Cena, Batista, Edge, and Orton. Those were really the top 4 younger talents, if you will, and especially still had Triple H and Michaels and Taker and Hardy and all these other guys. But those were the 4 bedrocks. So if a Cena missed any time, you still had Batista, Orton, and Edge. If Edge missed time, you still had Orton, Batista, Cena. You get what I'm saying? It makes the product so much better, and it allows you to absorb the loss of any one individual so much better. And I don't get why they just are insisting on it's got to be one guy and it's only one guy and that is it. Never made any sense to me at all. Still doesn't. At Principal NYNB, what was the biggest injustice about the invasion angle? The fact that they sat there and prostituted out WCW's C- team, their low A affiliate, basically, as being WCW. Of all the dumb bullshit involved with that dumb bullshit angle, the biggest bullshit of all was that you had WCW invade the WWF. And there was no Hogan, there was no Hall, there was no Nash, there was no Goldberg, there was no Steiner, there was no Luger, there was no Sting, there was no Macho Man, there was none of that at all. How can you invade and have a legit invasion angle without having all of your killers and assassins? That makes no fucking sense. That's the biggest injustice about the invasion angle, other than the fact, obviously, that we had waited years as wrestling fans to get this type of storyline, and the invasion angle, which was nothing more than an excuse for Vince to put out his pro-WWF propaganda and spin it in his favor, was the whole purpose of that. Now, that was perhaps the even bigger injustice. At New Flavor 408, if WWE brought back the hardcore division with the 24/7 rules, who do you think would be the champion right now? If they did, maybe a Dean Ambrose. Maybe. I thought it would have been cool to have a hardcore belt and have Santino be the 24/7 champion. Imagine all the Crash Holly type of stuff you could have done with that. At Cyanide Rain, what would you say if Scott Steiner came back to challenge Rusev, say he's fat, and told Lana to suck his dick? I would indeed pop wood. Major wood. How fucking awesome would that be? Steiner coming back, saying, "Give me that fucking mic!" And then he breaks down a math lesson, American Steiner style, for Rusev and Lana. Oh, fucking God. And he say, "Rusev, you have some fat asses! You had a chance, but you have no chance, but you had a chance, but you couldn't run because you had fat ass!" And then he would sit there and just overtly come out and fucking hit on Lana every week. Talking about, "Hey, baby, how about you get away from that Bulgarian bum and you get yourself with a real body." Oh, God, how awesome would that be? At Joe Novak Jr., WWE, book that, please. Hey, Schley, do you see Lesnar holding the belt for this a significant time as a part-timer? No, I don't. Which makes it interesting. I know I've said before that Lesnar had to win the title at some point, and I stand behind that. I've also said that, Cena needs to hold the belt at some point in time, which unfortunately we've got, but there was a reason for that too. But the problem is that if you, let's say, have Lesnar win the belt at SummerSlam and you have visions of him, let's say, carrying it to WrestleMania 31, unless you're going to book him on more dates, you're talking about a world champion that's barely going to appear on television and will only wrestle a couple of pay-per-views. When you're trying to sell the WWE network long term, you're not going to have the WWE champion appearing on Raw every week. You're not going to have him appearing at every pay-per-view. I just can't see it. Not as a long term. You could get away with it, I think, for 2 to 3 months, which is why I would wait if I was going to do it. If I did it here at SummerSlam, I'd have him drop it by Survivor Series. Or if you really want him to be the champ heading into WrestleMania 31, then you got to have him win it at the Rumble. That way he only has to work Elimination Chamber and then WrestleMania, and then you could be done with it. At Dexter C73 rounds out this Q&A by asking, should the WWE bring back enhancement matches? Not where they have a show full of them, but I think a couple of enhancement matches are definitely good, because part of the problem you have, I think, so much is that you have two superstars or established names, and both guys are trying to get in their own shit usually, and both guys are trying to get themselves over, and they're not really so concerned with getting one guy over the way the one guy needs to get over. Well, if you have an enhancement talent, bring somebody in from the local indie scene, let's say, their only job is to get this individual over. Their only chance of getting repeat work as an enhancement talent, and who knows, maybe someday getting more, is to make sure that they do their job here to get this guy even more over there. So I would be okay with having some enhancement matches on the show every week, maybe 2 or 3 of them on a Raw, because here's the deal is that, it leads to a problem when you don't have any of these enhancement matches. You get so many repeat matches that fans are tuning them out anyways, because I've seen this shit 15 times before. Why in the fuck am I going to see this again? And this whole notion that an enhancement match would sit there and be a bad thing and would lead to a loss of ratings, I just fundamentally disagree with. But anyways, thanks for all of you that submitted your questions for this Q&A. Again, Monday, Wednesday, Friday Q&A episodes here on OTRSCentral. Check out the information in the description box on how to get your questions answered here by me, the Schleg Daddy, on OTRSCentral.